There, painstakingly decorated, was my first dead body. Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to attitudes. Attitudes to life and all it entails, from the moment we first learn to walk to the day ultimately we forget. And today that brings me on to the perfect holiday topic, death. We've really not thought this through. In all seriousness, of course, for many of us, the holidays can be a difficult reminder of those we've lost. For me, it's my nana, my father-in-law, my grandfather-in-law, and not kidding, my other cat. Instinctively, it feels like they should all be here, lining the dinner table, each with a glass of sherry, or in my nana's case, several, basking in the glow of the Christmas tree. I've just realised that none of that would apply to my cat, who nonetheless would have capsized the Christmas tree. The point is, it got me thinking about a topic that's very rarely discussed in the realm of British-American differences, and that is our attitudes to death itself. You see, hailing from a country that thrust the Victorian age upon an unsuspecting world almost 200 years ago, I'm quite used to the notion of morbidity. Aside from the fact that Victoria herself publicly mourned Prince Albert for 40 years, I remember once stumbling upon a selection of deeply unsettling photographs from that very time. They depicted a family sitting on their lovely Victorian furniture. Nobody was smiling, but then that was expected in photography's early years, and the family looked much like any other family. That is, until I discovered that the baby, seated in its mother's lap, had been dead for several days. Instagram would have been in meltdown. But the imprint of these moribund black and whites remained in my head for quite some time. That said, I was probably relieved that the act of putting the dead on display was consigned to the 19th century. Or so I thought. You see, here in America, a custom persists that I'm not sure I was altogether prepared for. And that was the open casket funeral, the practice of displaying a recently deceased relative or loved one inside a funeral home for all to see. Let me take you back to 2009. It was then that I attended my first open casket funeral. In fact, to be more precise, it was a visitation, but the results were much the same. It was held for an elderly relative of my wife at a local funeral home, and having not met the deceased while she was alive, the wake bore little personal sentiment to me, but there was a multitude in attendance for whom it did. Indeed, such was the size of the gathering, I could see very little initially, just the back of people's heads, which seemed intent on looking toward the front. And as I waited my turn, a series of thoughts passed through me. What does a dead body actually look like? Will her eyes be open? Which stand will be selling the popcorn? People at the front started to turn as my stomach did likewise. Driven by morbid curiosity and familial obligation, I continued to remain in line until it happened. The group in front of me, apparently satisfied with their viewing, dispersed, leaving a line of sight that led directly to a white wooden casket, and there, painstakingly decorated, was my first dead body. It felt like that moment in Stand By Me when they discovered the body of Ray Brower, except this body was not blemished by scars and cuts. In fact, her appearance was almost too good. I'd say she resembled more a mannequin than an actual human, heavily made up and rendered in a light shade of formaldehyde. This was a final chance for those who knew her to see her one last time, but all I could think was, what if she wakes up? No, just kidding. All I could think was, is this how she'll be remembered? I mean, it's definitely how I remember her. First impressions are so important. Anyhow, my next reaction after I was completely taken aback by the whole ordeal was to quietly ask my wife if it was kosher to leave this sort of thing prematurely. It wasn't, but we did. As we hit the road and headed home, my brain didn't know what to do with the images it had just received, whether to file them in the same memory bank as those morbid photos, or condemn them to a part of my brain labelled "no thanks." As it happens though, this would not be my last open casket service, having attended those of my father-in-law and grandfather-in-law in just the last 2 years. And honestly, now that I say that out loud, their appearance during these showings is actually not how I remember them. What I meant to say is, of course it's not. I mean, for me, I'll always remember their laughter, genetically passed down from one to the other and unleashed most fervently in times of celebration. So I suppose in retrospect, open caskets are less a way to forge one final memory, but rather a chance to say one final goodbye. It's a tradition. It's very North American. It's also still very much a culture shock. You see, having attended a grand total of 2 funerals during my life in England, 3 chief differences stand out. Firstly, I never once attended a funeral home, largely because funerals almost take place exclusively in churches, crematoriums, and cemeteries. Secondly, the very practice of public open casket wakes or visitations is almost unheard of in the UK, hence the passage of 30 years before my Ray Brower moment. And then there's number 3, the funeral procession. In the state of Indiana, and this might vary by state, it's not uncommon to see total strangers completely pull over to the side of the road as a mark of respect to the oncoming funeral cars. I first encountered this phenomenon as one of those total strangers, both in the sense that I was an immigrant and was not part of the procession. And initially it was a deeply jarring situation, as if we'd been pulled over by the police or something, but when my wife explained what was happening, I felt uneasy in a different way, as if we were somehow uninvited guests in a family's private moment. But don't be fooled by America's more direct approach to mourning loved ones. Let me finish today with arguably a slightly lighter side of death. You see, as with British phrases such as "she bought it" or "he popped his clogs" or "they both went for a Burton," America has its own euphemisms for dying. As well as the mutually understood "passed away," you might occasionally hear phrases like "he hit the big one" or "she got smoked" or quite simply, "they went for the big sleep," which is also a book and film. And since, ironically, it's my birthday tomorrow, a big sleep is precisely what I'm going to do. Not like that. And so that's it for this episode. I hope that wasn't too grim. Please click the subscribe button to ensure that my videos don't get lost in the pond. A big shout out to all my patrons who make this channel possible. Without you, I would not be able to justify the work that I do, from the writing, research, technical equipment, and, replacement Christmas trees. If you would like to become a patron of this channel, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. All patrons will have access to my secret live stream, and those pledging $5 or more a month will get my secret podcast and more. Until next time, have a brilliant day, and I will see you soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.